Do 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 do.
Welcome to the Red Bean Podcast, the New Orleans edition. This is your host, Mr. Toad.
And I'm Dr. Frog.
We're going to be talking about a movie called Equilbrium, and it's a movie I really wanted you to watch, and I loved your reaction throughout the film.
Yes.
But before we get into that...
you mentioned this is one of your favorite films.
This would be one of the movies, I was mentioning that, if I was to be put in a bomb shelter, and let's just say, for example, I was going to be in there for 30 years, and I was never to ever come out until that time period, this would be one of the movies I would take in there with me.
You know, when this first released, I remember seeing it in the theaters. I saw it at a film festival, science fiction film festival in Columbus, Ohio. But there are film festivals. Another big one is in Chicago, and another's in Boston. Those are really three big ones. But it was around 2 a.m. in the 24-hour one, and it was late at night. A lot of the scenes in Equilibrium take place at night, and it was a little bit, the pacing was definitely slower, if you could imagine watching films for 24 hours.
Sure.
And then you get a kind of slower paced one with Christian Bale staring confusedly at lots of different happenings in front of him. But it was very engaging. There was obviously a lot of symbolism around World War II and human, themes about human dignity and what it means to, what happens if your society is so ordered that, yes, you're preventing wars, but at what cost to our own humanity? So there were some of those themes explored, and this is a really good science fiction film. And I say science fiction because it's about a dystopian future post-World War III, but there are, I guess, some scientific elements like futuristic drugs that haven't been developed yet.
Yeah.
There's, consciousness control and that sort of thing that, sometimes falls into science fiction. It's beyond our current science.
Yeah.
Is what science fiction sometimes has as an element. And I just thought it was really well done as a sort of dystopian thought experiment. What would happen and what would you do if you were in this kind of dystopia? Would you follow the orders or would you join the resistance?
Join the resistance. Before we get into much more detail on our review, the running time was 107 minutes, and the release date was December 6, 2002.
Yeah.
So we're talking 22 years this movie has been released. Wow. It's incredible. The budget was $20 million, and the box office was $5.3 million. So it sounded like it kind of bombed a little bit on the...
It looked like
kind of thing.
They borrowed some elements of gun fu, which in the movie they call it something else.
The Gun Kata.
The Gun Kata. But basically, the fighting sort of reminded me of Matrix-style fighting. You do some close-quarter combat, some gun slapping, I
love the gun slap.
And there's lots of really cool, really good action scenes, especially where there was one particular one that stood out where he threw the extra magazines down the hallway only to incorporate reloading his weapon.
And then he would pick up the weapon from someone he just killed.
Yes,
and he would use his weapon on other people.
Yeah, there was no time where the main character was unarmed where I didn't think, he could just take everyone else's weapons immediately. And, but it was a little bit of a power fantasy in that. But it really reminded me of things like John Wick fighting and Neo.
John Wick would approve of this man.
Keanu Reeves would have probably approved with the Matrix style fighting. And I think that slogan of they included that in part of the marketing.
Yeah, I love the front cover. It says "Forget the Matrix." After I saw this movie, I kind of forgot the Matrix. I to be honest with you. I will give a quick film.
Because the Matrix wanted you to forget you.
Exactly.
That's all. Yeah.
I think someone took the blue pill. In a futuristic world, a regime has eliminated war by suppressing emotions. Book, art, and music are strictly forbidden, and feeling is a crime, punishable by death. Cleric John Preston, played by Christian Bale, is a top-ranking government agent responsible for destroying those who resist these rules. When he misses a dose of Prozium, a mind-altering drug that hinders emotions, Preston, who has been trained to enforce strict laws of the new regime, suddenly becomes the one capable of overthrowing it. Yeah. What was your takeaway with the artwork and the way they were so vicious in destroying it? What were your thoughts when you saw that first scene?
It brought me back to World War II, because that was obviously famous, but also throughout the agency, the burning of the
The
a
Mona
great
Lisa.
library of Alexandria.
Yeah.
In Egypt, I believe.
The destruction of knowledge.
There's been a sort of history of
Book burning.
a way to destroy a culture when you're imposing a new regime or culture is to destroy the artifacts and cultural symbols of the older culture. And this is a way of saying, look, in the past, art was used as a way of evoking emotions. So now that the new religion, so to speak, and they even have titles like clerics, right? The new religion, so to speak, that involves a sort of faith-based adherence to it, maybe requires burning all of the previous artifacts that would cause or give rise to emotions in people, along with the drug to, stabilize people's emotions or deaden their feelings or whatnot.
I'm not going to fully read out the entire plot point here,
Sure.
but one of the things I did like about it is the government in this futuristic dystopia, it's called Libria, is governed by the Tetragrammaton Council, led by Father, who communicates propaganda throughout giant video screens. The police force is led by the Grammaton clerics, elite fighters, trained in the art of Gun Kata, which is like what I thought, this was such a selling point for me, because this is really, it kind of brings me to that point where if you ever hear George Lucas talking about Star Wars, one of the biggest fears he had when he first released the movie was, are people going to really believe that Yoda is really this alien, or are they going to just see a puppet? And that was one of the things he was so scared about. But when people saw the movie, they said, you know what, this is believable. This is not a puppet. And it was such a relief for him. And I really feel like there's a certain threshold where you're saying, is this funny or nonsense, or can I take this seriously? And I think with the Gun Kata, with the way they showed the science of like the geometry and the pointing of the gun, I felt like
they did some training montages, yeah. And if there really is a culture that focuses on this sort of training montage, it makes sense that kind of fighting would exist. Because you might ask yourself, in a future dystopia, it makes sense that they would have conventional weapons. They don't have futuristic plasma or something, weapons or something.
They had just survived World War III.
And of course, there'd be a focus with some of the broken down buildings and structures that you might expect from the East Soviet bloc or something. More hand-to-hand combat and more focus on
more efficiency. You have to be really efficient. Like, I think he was even
pragmatism.
Saying, yeah, you're 80 to 90% more efficient at destroying your target if you were pointing at the specific angle in every shooting incident or short close quarter combat, as some people, or CQB for us.
And it really goes into world building.
Yes. The lighting. How did you like the darkness?
I like the use of colors and lighting as well. So it starts out with a lot of gray, white and black contrasting colors.
Smoky
as well, yeah. And then, of course, when the main character starts to experience emotions, there's that scene where he pulls down the sort of opaque covering of his window, and there's oranges and yellows, and there's a rainbow that comes.
That shock look on his face.
So sort of, if emotions are sort of the color, bring color to the life, is what I think the metaphor being used. But it was really well done. It was definitely beautiful. The number of expressions of a stoic Christian Bale face, though, for an hour 47 minutes, did sort of drag on me in terms of the pacing. Because I know you're supposed to be wondering what's he experiencing right now.
Yeah.
And I get the show not tell,
which
was done well. But I sort of didn't care after some point. I said, let's move the plot along.
I know you were like trying to push everything along.
I'm tired of him, sniffing ribbons and having flashbacks.
See, for me, it's like when I watch that kind of stuff, it kind of reminds me of the art form of Stephen King. And
really?
One of the things I love about Stephen King books, when I used to read them a lot, was it's a slow burn. And this movie is definitely a slow burn, because at first you're like, oh man, is anything going to happen? And then as you watch further into the film, it slowly started to drag you into it. And I loved your reactions in the film, because you got to a point where you were like yelling at John Preston.
I had to stand up and cover my head and face with my hands at disbelief at the actions, which weren't fully understood at the time.
I loved your rage.
I did. I got annoyed, and I remember I verbally said, I was like, you could have been a hero. instead of an idiot. But little did I know there were twists and turns.
Remember my response in the background? I was like, Dr. Frog, I think you need some Prozium.
You were cackling. You were cackling like the Emperor. When Darth Vader
was
like, tormented over his decision.
I'm sitting there like shooting the electricity on my fingers and zapping you.
And I was like, no.
It was great.
Impossible. But yes, and actually Star Wars has a lot of the same imagery with World War II, in fact. Yep. And there's that contrast of rebellion versus a sort of fascism. I think it's beautifully done. Would I have acted the same way? No, but I think that Christian Bale did a great job of being authentic to someone who hadn't experienced emotions and was going through that process. So, I think the acting was well done.
We're going to jump into one aspect of the film. They had a flag called the Flag of Libria.
You can tell, it kind of
the four T's on the flag represent the Tetragrammaton Council, which that flag also looks like something else we would have seen in World War II.
Well, in World War II, and it looks a little bit like the St. Edmund's Cross from World War I for Germany. Yeah. But it also with the red and the black and white.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it also looks like an Indian peace symbol if it were designed a little bit differently.
It also looks like that symbol that they have in Buddhism too.
The Buddhism symbol, yes. I'm sorry, not the Indian.
It's Buddhism, yeah. So we're going to get into this a little bit more of the plot. In 2072, which is not far from now, which is a little scary, John Preston is a high-ranking cleric whose wife, Vivian, was executed as a sense offender, leaving him as a single parent of 2. What did you think about that scene when she just looks at him and kisses him and says, "Remember me"?
Well, he certainly did. And the thing is, he seemed to be only safe remembering her in his dreams. Which means, when you're at work, especially with the intense sort of military work that the main character was doing, you don't want to be bringing up emotional memories in the middle of that work, especially if you could die by showing emotion in that culture. So it makes sense that he would be sort of trapped in his dreams.
You might get processed if you cry at work.
Yeah, or if you cry in your sleep,
Yeah, well, hopefully there's not too many cameras.
As long as the kids don't report you.
Exactly. That was crazy that his own kids could report him. And his son reported him in the movie. He's like, "I wanted to just let you know that I've reported that you're vile Prozium."
The kids, and he was on not to spoil the movie too much, but the kids had to sell it. If you and your sibling can feel, but that dad is pretty strict and high up in the,
you'll take him out.
Talk about being the pastor's daughter, right? You're going to have to. So, in some ways they thought, well, maybe if I didn't do that, my dad would thought it would be suspicious that I didn't report the incident.
That's right.
So, yeah, they had to be good, Hitler Jugend would be the German term. The youth that supported Nazi Germany.
That's
but
right.
They were trained similarly, perhaps. I wonder the level of brainwashing between the chemical and the messaging. It kind of reminded me of 1984 a little bit.
Yeah.
There was a sort of big brother, in this case, father.
Very, very North Korea. Very North Korea.
It showed a TV, and there was constant messaging even while at work.
Propaganda was everywhere. I remember I mentioned to you as we were sitting on the couch watching the film, I said, can you imagine living in a society like that where maybe half of your day is just consumption of propaganda and then you do your rest of your job?
And not to get too much into it, but I looked at you and I said, yes, I can very much imagine that, being a pawn within a system where you can't speak your real thoughts.
I'm just a gear within the machine.
But here's the thing, though. Even once you start to have some emotions, you got to realize, if you're really a professional, you've been doing that work for years, you got to be able to play along. You can't just see one puppy dog and suddenly risk your own life for a puppy dog,
I totally sympathize with John Preston throughout this film. It hits a soft spot in my heart.
If I were to do a summary of all the times that he risked his life, there's 50 either people or animals being killed in front of him, but he risks his own life to save one of them. And I'm like, dude, you're 49 out of 50 into it. Why are you risking your life now after the 49 out of 50 are gone?
This is what I love. This is what I love about it, because I love this film in the sense that I love that it got under your skin and it just kept working you over and over. And I could see you becoming more animated up to the point where all of a sudden everything that you thought was going
Yeah.
on was wrong.
Well,
and it was different. It tricked you. It was an unreliable narrator.
Well, part of the uncomfortableness of the film, for me at least, was I put myself in their position.
Yep.
And I'm very good at following rules, right? I didn't get sent down to the principal's office that often. I followed the rules, and I think one thing that it makes you confront in the film is we would all like to think that we'd be rebels, right? Living underground, the threat, it'd be certainly exciting, the threat of death, just to oppose something ideologically. But what worries me is I put myself in that person's position, and I think, I'm probably just going to be the HR rep that, I'm going to go back to budgeting and accounting and be a cog in the wheel. And that was something that I had to kind of confront. Would I really have risked my life for some of the things that Christian Bale's character did?
I could see that.
But that's a good tension and question that I think the filmmakers wanted you to confront in yourself.
I like the idea that the director and the writer of this film, he said, how can I get my audience to feel? I love that he made you feel.
Yes.
And you felt it, because everyone else didn't have emotions because of the Prozium. But us, as the audience, we were the subject of being forced in a world with no feelings, and we know what the rules are, and you see someone actively breaking the rules. There's something in us that says conformity, follow the rules. And when you see someone who's breaking the rules in a world of nothing but rules, it gets a rise out of some people.
Well,
sure.
And everyone always looks at the Prozium, but they never think of the Conzium. But really, it is one of those, self-preservation. What's the meaning and purpose of life? Are there things worth dying for? There were characters in the film who said, they said, what's your purpose in life? And of course, the main character was confronted and didn't know the answer at the moment. And then they asked the rebels.
No, he gave you the
to uphold the society.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
He's like, I'm following orders.
But then she said, really? And then he paused. So maybe there was uncertainty there. But then when they were asked, the rebellion people were like, to feel.
See, the part where you just mentioned, he paused, because he said what he was supposed to say, and then he thought to himself, do I believe in what I'm saying?
I know what I'm supposed to say. I know I'm supposed to say
this, but I don't really, now that I think about it, I don't know if I actually believe in this anymore.
Yeah, I'm used to getting an A+ on the paper.
And now I'm questioning, was it even worth writing on the paper? Was this all nonsense? Was this a false thing that we're following?
Prozium can deaden your emotions, but they can't give you the right answer.
That's correct. I'm going to get back to the plot point one more time. Following a raid, Preston's partner, Errol Partridge, which is also played by Sean Bean. Remember when you saw him and you got really excited? And I was like, do you remember Game of Thrones, Season 1?
Was it Ned
Stark?
Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite house in Game of Thrones.
The House of Stark.
Yep.
But here's the funny part about that whole thing is that every time Sean Bean plays a role, he always gets killed in his roles.
Pretty much.
He gets shot in Equilibrium. He gets beheaded in Game of Thrones, and I forgot there's a couple other ones where he gets killed too. It's like
even worse though. He was reading Yeats when he got shot.
I remember. I loved your reaction.
I'm like, he couldn't be holding like T.S. Eliot or Ginsberg or something. He had to be holding Yeats or not even Coleridge. It's like pick some better authors to die for if you're gonna.
If you're gonna lose your life, don't lose it on Yeats.
I mean, look. I'll give you a hint. In The Very Hungry Caterpillar, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the caterpillar eats.
That's
a
right.
lot.
He eats a lot.
And you didn't have to finish that second chapter. You could put it down and not die.
Exactly.
But if you're going to die, at least pick a good series.
At least a good series.
Yeah.
We'll get back to the plot one more time. Preston accidentally breaks his last vial of Prozium and is unable to refill them before the next raid. A brief episode of emotion set evoking memory-stirring feelings. This is when he starts to remember his wife.
Oh, jeez.
And how she's sitting there, and he's kind of like looking at her like dumbfounded. But you can kind of see in that scene, she's kind of looking at him like she really, you could tell she loves him.
Yeah.
In a sort of like kind of a hidden way. But I loved how he immediately, the door breaks open. This is one of the things I think Equilibrium really shines, is there's these calm moments, and then all of a sudden, it's like someone comes in here with like a lead hammer, and they just hit you in the back of the head immediately.
So you know how Terminator throws out some dates? So you kind of get an idea of how many decades have gone by. You know, they're a bit older, right? They're married, they have kids.
Yep.
I'm wondering, were they part of the first generation that started taking Prozium? Maybe when they got married.
Yep. I think so.
They used to feel things for each other. When she kissed him as her last goodbye and said, "Remember me."
Yeah.
Was she trying to evoke emotion or say, you know, remember maybe who we were before Prozium? Or are they, you know, second and third generation into having Prozium their entire life? It seemed, I wondered how far away and how recent is this Prozium introduced to the culture?
Yeah, they just mentioned World War III and the survivors of World War III. Their response is, emotions are the reason why we're having problems. If we take the emotions away, we're going to take the wars away. But emotions make us who we are. Would you say, Dr. Frog?
Well, obviously, I think in life there's balance, right? So emotions, and I'll borrow this from Noel Carroll, who wrote Art in Three Dimensions in 2010. He was the former president of the Aesthetics Association.
Sure.
And then I think he taught for City University, New York, and I think he was at Madison, Wisconsin, in aesthetics and philosophy of art. But he distinguishes between moods and emotions, being an emotion has to have a target.
Yep.
And moods, for example, are really the background that give you a propensity to feel something that's there. So what this movie did is they did a lot of mood setting.
Yeah.
And then they left it up to you to sort of interpret what the blank stare is really meant for the feelings of the people experiencing it. But like anything else, there can be some, imagine someone with anger issues.
Yeah.
And by the way, the justification for destroying all emotions, they kept saying it was to prevent wars, which would presumably arise out of anger and resentment and these things. So there's a certain cluster of emotions that seem to be dangerous. And then in this dystopia, they seem to want to wipe out all emotions. So maybe there's a balance we can have. You can imagine someone who has anger issues, or imagine someone experiencing great anxiety. Maybe there's anti-anxiety medication, or people experiencing depression might use antidepressants.
So I think what you're basically saying is maybe instead of using a sledgehammer like Libria is, you're maybe saying maybe we should use a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer.
It's fine that they developed a drug that can deaden some of those feelings.
Yes.
But maybe use it in a clinical setting when appropriate with certain kinds of cases. But I don't see the need to destroy all emotions just because certain kinds of extreme emotions can lead. So for example, they were doing a lecture on hate crime earlier. Yes. So let's study hate and what brings that out, and are there ways of addressing things like anger and hate
and the consequences of a hate crime and the resulting victims of it.
The consequences were very stick and carrot discussed. But since they have these super medicines that can manipulate emotions, obviously, why not talk about how to maybe do talk therapy alongside cognitive behavioral therapy?
So you're saying maybe this idea of forcing people to take a medication, and by not taking the medication, the response of the government in this world is summary combustion and processing.
Imagine if instead, the response was, we're going to focus on emotional intelligence. Some people are very good at regulating their emotions and others aren't. And for those who aren't, there's this optional medicine that would help them do better within that current zeitgeist of a culture. And then you could picture some people taking some of the medicine, but maybe have the medicine that's more targeted on specific kinds of emotions, like anti-anxiety medicine addresses anxiety.
I can see that point of view.
But, obviously, like anything, so Aristotle talked about the doctrine of the golden mean.
The golden mean.
He was addressing, what does it mean to be a good person? He talked about eudaimonia in Book 6 of Nicomachean Ethics, one of his books. But the doctrine of the golden mean was basically, in order to be a virtuous person, you have to habitually do an action, not just do a good thing once, but have a habit of it. Yeah. So there's a sort of orderliness to it. But also, with any sort of virtue, like being brave or just, it lies in the middle of two extremes of excess and deficit. And those excesses and deficits are vices.
Yeah.
And so to avoid those vices, you need to be in the middle.
You got to be in the middle.
And so similarly, I'm not. This movie definitely says, look, the only response to extreme emotions is to have no emotions at all. And obviously, it's a false dichotomy in some sense. You don't have to do either of those options. You can have an appropriate emotional response.
Excellent.
That's not dangerous at all. But that in the back of my mind, I was thinking, why doesn't that culture just move towards that? And I think it is. It was a swing back.
It was like it went and swung in one direction really hard, and now it's going to be kind of going back in the other direction.
Yeah, maybe cyclical of. Again, there used to be this tension between safety and liberty. Liberty is where you're free to do anything. Safety is where you can have your safety secured. How much do you balance that? If everyone's free, it's going to be dangerous. But if everyone's... You can make a North Korea type state that's extremely safe, but people don't have liberty to lead that.
I kind of look at it this way, similar how Benjamin Franklin looked at it. If you're willing to give up a little bit of security if you're willing to give up a little bit of freedom for security, you don't deserve freedom or security.
Yeah.
These are things that
there were a lot of good libertarians among the founding fathers. A G.A. Cohen was what I was citing in terms of the self-ownership, equality, and self-ownership.
Sure.
Yeah, Freedom, Equality, and Self-Ownership was his book. He was a socialist who, after reading Robert Nozick, who's a conservative political philosopher, ended up becoming a left-wing libertarian.
Yeah.
But always a good read, and it's good to know the philosophical underpinnings that are in some of these science fiction films.
I like this idea that now we have an example of what happens when John Preston...
What does
happens when he intentionally skips an additional dose of Prozium, hiding them behind his bathroom mirror? Preston is replaced with Partridge, his
Prozium.
Yep. With an ambitious career, Brandon, who admires Preston's work as a cleric. On a raid, they arrest sex offender Mary O'Brien. So, what were your thoughts about Brandt or Ty Diggs, his new partner, and what did you think about Amelia Watson playing as Mary O'Brien?
I wasn't that impressed with Amelia Watson. I mean, I get it. She had a relationship with Sean Bean's character Partridge, who was the former partner of Christian Bale. I think Ty Diggs did an excellent job. Sort of the energetic, up-and-coming cleric.
Yeah.
And sort of under Christian Bale's character. Both of them sort of had an intuition for when people were...
they could feel,
feeling emotion,
but not feel themselves.
Yeah, they could tell when someone was...
I would imagine, like you're seeing someone's eyes fluttering, just like in that scene where John Preston is with his son and his daughters in there, and they're kind of eating breakfast, and he looks at his father and says, I saw this person crying. Should I report them? He says, absolutely.
No. You have to make fun of them first and then report them.
No,
I'm just kidding. So here's the thing. What's the name of the drug again? It's something?
Prozium.
So I wonder what the ads are like. If you have a feeling that lasts more than 8 hours, please consult your doctor.
And if you are feeling anything, please make sure to call the Gamatron clerics to make sure they come over and take care of you in processing and summary combustion. I like this aspect of when Preston started to feel.
Yes.
Preston feels remorse for killing his partner. He develops an emotional relationship with O'Brien, and it seeks atonement. He uncovers clues that lead to meeting Jurgen, the underground leader. Jurgen plans to disrupt the Prozium production to spark an uprising and convinces Preston that father must be assassinated.
Jurgen, and the German pronunciation of that is Jurgen.
Jurgen.
So with some of the German names and symbolism around World War II, I thought that was pretty evident. I think it was interesting also that some of the resistance scenes were shot in churches. And it makes you wonder with symbolism like clerics and father, with this sort of newer age religion. It's a sort of comment on what happens if you're too pragmatic in a culture.
Sure. And the other aspect here is we also have Vice Consul DuPont meets with Preston to reveal that there is a traitor in the upper ranks of the clerics, and assigns Preston the task of unmasking the traitor. Relieved, Preston accepts and promises to locate the underground leader. What did you think of Vice Consul DuPont? The character that he kept answering to, who is the highest leading officer.
Sure, and he was supposed to be the sort of voice for the father. The father tells him messages.
He's the head guy. Yeah.
He's the sort of head guy, but he, I thought he did an excellent job. And, there's not much to say because he wasn't in very many scenes. But there was certainly a mysteriousness. It kind of reminded me of The Wizard of Oz. So, in the fighting, I would say I had... callbacks to the Matrix. In terms of suspicion of the neighbors and others around you, reminded me of Invasion of the Body Snatchers from the 1970s. And then this sort of figure of who's behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. Who's the wizard? There's a little bit of who's behind the curtain going on with this society. Who's really running it? It was a sort of common theme that came up. And how do you topple?
Yeah.
There's some interesting discussions about power in politics.
I also liked a lot how John Preston also kind of played DuPont, because you can kind of tell DuPont is this arrogant individual, and the minute he tries to get Preston in a situation, he was always trying to get him in a chokehold, but at the same time, he's like, I won't put you in the chokehold if you give me the things I want. And that was one of the things I loved about Preston when he was like, yes, sir, you're 100%, you're correct. I will make sure to double my efforts to find the resistance. Yeah. He's like, good, do it. I love how he's like, just do it. Just go out there, do it. And then he turns around, and I loved every time he was in that room, he kept looking at the guy on the side there at his weapon. He's like, is he pointing that rifle at me? Okay, he's not pointing the rifle at me. I love that. One of the things I liked about Preston's character is that you could always tell he was always on point, always on the edge. You could always tell that. One of the reasons I liked how his new partner, Ty Diggs as Andrew Brendan, one of the things I loved about him was that he could tell why John Preston was so good, because he always trained. Yeah. Even to the point where you could see him like having that one montage scene where they're both practicing with these katanas. And I love how
one person had the katana at the neck, the other had him
the collarbone, and then the other one he's like tapping him in the groin area. He's looking at it, he's like, oh man,
yeah,
I'm going to split you open. You might break my collarbone, but I'm going to split something else.
Sort of. It kind of reminds you of kendo, right? Which is Japanese sword fighting. But sometimes you stop when you hit the point where you have delivered a blow. A killing blow. But anyway, it was good training montages, good fighting.
I liked
wonderful weapon.
The other thing I liked about it was the part when you started to get really worked up. When you saw John Preston taking care of the dog. When you saw him
saving people and animals.
And saving people, and he's like...
Here's why. No, I'll back up.
And you were upset that he was like, oh, this guy's about to cause an execution. But you could kind of tell... John Preston was slipping up, but the question was,
I would have done a better job than him.
You're like, I would have definitely executed those dogs, no problem.
No, I wouldn't have done it. But here's a common theme, and this is, I don't know if it's something with the director or the story writer. Here's a common theme that they get really excited about. There's 50 helpless people. He watches and stands by as 49 of them die. Then he dives in to almost self-sacrifice for the final one. There was this sort of fixation on the final one of the group. It's the 50th person. At least I can save the 50th person from this massacre. And then I'm like, why are you sacrificing your life now for this 50th when you just watched or facilitated 49 out of the 50 dogs?
You see, that's the thing.
Same thing with the dog. All the dogs died. Oh, no. This one puppy. Let me just sacrifice my life for this one puppy.
I will say this on defense of John Preston. He did say, hey, I think we shouldn't execute the dogs because these dogs need to be tested for a disease. Yeah. So he wanted them to test them, and then he was going to take one of them with him.
Those were excuses of like, oh, well, we need to find out more information, so keep one alive. He was using these as excuses
to keep the massacre going.
The orders were to exterminate all of them. They weren't.
And that was the whole argument he had between DuPont, was that he said, why are we executing everyone? Aren't we supposed to do a summary judgment? Are we supposed to do some processing and collect information?
Yeah.
If we just go out there and just start massacring these people, Aren't we just wild dogs? Aren't we supposed to follow doctrine? And here was the big thing. I was looking at you, and I was trying to get what was your aspect or your thought on it was, when you look at it, the way that the DuPont responded was, we don't care about necessarily what the doctrine says. We care about the obedience.
Yeah.
So the message doesn't count. The obedience counts. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so here's what I would have done if I was in a situation. First of all, it's sort of like being in the military and then deciding to be a pacifist while you're a high-ranking official in the military. It's one of those like, okay, so you find yourself in this situation. There's three things you can really do. One is compartmentalize it and say, look, I'm going to work with the resistance and take this down.
Yep.
But from 8 to 5, while I'm clocked in, I'm going to act within my role as almost the Nuremberg defense almost, right? I was following orders, right? Which isn't great, but it keeps you alive compared to sacrificing yourself for the 50th puppy. You know, the one of 50 puppies, right? Now, so you can do that. Another is, I think, would also be reasonable and say, okay, let's say I'm a pacifist, but I'm in the military. Maybe I step down. Presumably, you still have the liberty to step down in that culture. He could have become an accountant. He could have become a librarian. You see what I mean? There's nothing forcing him to be a high-ranking military official. We're assuming that in that society, all that's punishable is the emotions. Someone could still say, I'm going to career change. They still have the liberty to quit or change jobs.
Yeah, but wouldn't there be an emotion connected to quitting your job?
No, you could just say, no, I'm going to find it more efficient and my interests in terms
optimization.
Yes. Yeah. I think I'd be an excellent librarian with my background in organizational skills, blah, blah, blah. The point is...
but they would take his gun away probably.
The point is there's a way, there's nothing in that culture that said it was forced conscription.
Sure.
There were no signs of forced conscription. He didn't say, I still have a contract I have to fulfill.
Yep.
Now, we could impose that and say, oh, he was forced to serve. But I didn't get that impression. So that's another thing. One is compartmentalize, but do your job, and then undermine it over time with the aid of others. The second is to transfer into something that's not morally questionable, and then to still, be a resistance underground.
Yeah, I kind of do the thing underground.
And then the third is this ridiculous thing where you stay the high-ranking official, but you start throwing your body in front of when they mow down 49 people, you dive in front of the 50th and say, no, we must save this one. Look, the hair smells interesting.
Well, we have to ask him for questioning. I think we need to collect some more evidence.
Yeah, I need to ask them about love.
I think we need to test this person for disease.
Yeah, the dogs.
We got to test.
It's one of those, that's just the route that I wouldn't have gone. Now, here's the thing, though. A lot of times in storytelling, they have to condense it.
Yep.
Maybe the two or three, the three highlighting missions that he goes on.
Yep.
Maybe he served dozens of others, compartmentalizing it, and maybe they're only showing the three important areas within. It might be a week span, it might be a month span where he kind of cracked a little bit. Where maybe he did compartmentalize it, and maybe he did mow down 50 people on different missions, but then on this one particular one, they wanted to show his emotion on the one critical one where he kind of broke down.
I felt like Preston was really showing his emotions when he went into the rebel stronghold, and this one guy runs by, and of course, his partner, Ty Diggs, takes a shot at this guy, and the guy falls into Preston's arms, and he's looking at him. I actually remember listening to the commentary. The actor that was being held by Christian Bale as he was falling to the ground, he had to hold his breath to look like he died or something in his arms.
Yeah.
He just kept holding it as they were filming it as he fell. And I just remember looking at Preston was looking at his hands, at his gloves and his hand, and he's like covered in blood, and he realizes, I'm a monster.
There's another common theme I found from that dying person. There was a wide-eyed expression of blue eyes looking into Christian Bale, just like there was that pause that the
very psychological
Emily, the Mary character,
Amelia Blunt's character.
Yes, her character also had that, which makes me think maybe they recognized that Preston was experiencing some emotion.
Yep, Mary O'Brien.
And it almost reminded me of that scene in The Departed, when Leonardo DiCaprio, when that one guy said, "Hey, I told you the wrong address, so how did you know to show up at that building? when I sent you the wrong address. And then Leo kind of pauses, and the guy goes wide-eyed as he realizes, of course, that Leo's the rat within the mob, and goes, and then he dies, right? But it reminded me of that scene of,
I did like
it's you.
Mary O'Brien's
You have
character.
emotion.
What I liked about Mary O'Brien's character is when John Preston finally confronts her, and he says, I have this picture. On the back of the picture it says freedom. What was in the front of that picture? What was the picture of? Do you remember?
He kept turning it over back and forth, and so I never got a good look at either side.
But the picture showed Mary O'Brien and his former partner together. They were lovers.
Yeah.
And that part where I love where she's like, my friends didn't kill him. I killed him. And she looked at him, and she just picks a pencil, and she's going to just try and put it right through his eye. I love that. He grabs her and turns her over on the desk. And
there was a lot of that, like, let me hold your arms, and then we'll be close together, and we'll stare in a mirror at each other, kind of. There was a lot of that,
I love the two hands as they're getting closer to each other, and you had the video.
And the camera. It's like they're watching. They're watching them.
Oh, yeah, that's not good.
That's not good. That's what I'm saying. You can do three actions. You can either be the good officer, but then undermine it secretly within your position of power, or transfer out, or you can do this crazy third option, which is good for television maybe, where you do be a bad officer and then risk your own life by doing things like touching hands with the...
And that's Equilbrium
with the
for you in a nutshell.
Yes. Touching hands and thinking of kissing the convict.
That's right.
To risk your life.
Me, a sex offender? No way.
It reminds me, it's like if you go back and watch Titanic from 1995. It's like Leonardo DiCaprio fancies this girl. They hang out in the basement in a truck, and now suddenly he's like sacrificing his life for them. It's like, dude, like, just calm down. You can preserve your own life.
I'm the king of the world as I'm being dragged into the...
He's delusional of the world.
I can't believe it. I could have gotten on one of these desks and I could have survived too.
Now, to be fair, in Titanic there was a more classism point, saying, when you have that taste of freedom, of being on the Titanic and being on the deck of it, I'm sure it must have been exhilarating for the people who...
For sure.
Attended.
We're going to return back to the plot one more time.
Yes.
When O'Brien is to be set to be executed, or as they would say, processed. Preston
again, it reminds me of Soylent Green from 1972. Or 73. Oh, you're going to the processing station for...
You're like, oh, that sounds not too bad.
They play nice music. They show you nice video.
Yeah, it's don't worry about it. It's like I know no one else ever comes out of the processing facility, but there's no big deal about that.
Yeah.
So Preston attempts to stop the execution and fails. His memory of his wife's execution triggers an emotional breakdown. Brendan, who has been suspecting Preston of being a sex offender, arrests and brings him before. Right. I loved your reaction when you saw John Preston. He's just like, he's walking out of the processing facility, and he's just like, you could just see how defeated he looks. He's like, oh man, my wife, she's dead. And I was there, and he's all these emotions, and he falls on his knees, and he hits his face on the ground, and he's just crying his eyes out. I remember you were like yelling. You were like, no, you're a sex offender. And then all of a sudden you see your partner. A sex offender.
Oh, sense offense.
Sense offender.
Exactly. Yeah, felt sense offense.
And here's the part that I loved about it.
But here's the thing, though. Okay, I get this as planned. It's like Robbie from War of the Worlds.
Yes.
Look, at some point, natural selection is going to take over. You can either run towards the tripod or away from the tripod. The people who say I'm going to run towards the tripod, you got to let them go.
I know.
If you're in a culture where crying gets put to death,
we're back to Robbie again.
Well, yeah, it's always about Robbie.
It's always about Robbie.
I mean, look, you got to let him run to the tripod. So sometimes you got to let the natural selection occur. This is the same way. And you're living in a culture. He's an adult. He's not a kid that's new to this.
Here's the weird thing about this
breaking down with emotion in the middle of public.
I totally love this.
You got to let him run to the tripod. You got to go.
I love it because we actually were on the opposite side on this one, because I was against Robbie. I'm like, punch Robbie, and you're like, let Robbie go. Now we're
let Robbie go.
Now you're.
I
want to punch Preston, but I'm saying don't just let Preston be. Man.
I'm saying
don't just let him be.
Take him to process.
Can't Preston cry on the front of the processing facility?
How does Preston? He can process his emotions all he wants.
That's right. He did process.
but
I love
the
that
fact
scene.
that it was planned.
Yeah.
I mean, this is. Go ahead.
Now we're going to spoiler territory, so we're
yeah.
just
But
spoiler
the
alert.
fact that was part of a plan, my emotions immediately 180.
I remember you were just like,
I went through,
and then you were in shock.
I was in shock.
I love that because you went from being like, this is like not a good movie to being like,
but he's an idiot.
and then you're like, this went just several above, a couple leagues above its weight class.
Oh yeah. I mean, the deceptions, and here's what I like about it.
I love how you can trick the audience.
There's trickery involved, like with the handgun exchange.
Yeah.
And you'll know what we're meaning if you've seen the film.
Yes.
Where it showed it to you on the screen.
Yeah. But you didn't get it.
30 minutes ago. 40 minutes prior.
Yep.
And you only picked up on it. It's like Sixth Sense kind of twisting where, Bruce Willis tries to open a door and it doesn't open. He's like, the door's probably locked. And only at the end are you like, wait a second.
I love
the details get filtered into the plan.
Here's the part that I love it when you do the twist or the shocking moment.
Great.
When Preston's on his knees, he has a bloody lip. He's just laying on the ground. And all of a sudden you have DuPont saying, "Cleric, what is your response to all of this?" He gets up and he's looking at him like, "You told me, sir, to bring the leader of the resistance, the traitor. I have brought you the traitor." And he just looks at his partner, at Ty Diggs, Andrew Brandt, and he's just like, "What, me?" And he's like, "Yes, him." And all of a sudden, you're like, and then he has the evidence, and then it's like everything stacks up against him.
Well, yeah, you took it when you arrested me.
Yeah, you took it away.
I love it.
And he's like, what? Hey, wait a second. And as he's getting dragged away and he's being held up, I loved it because
the wink that Christian Bale gave.
He's like, "You're gone, man." And he's like, "You're going to be taken to combustion." He's like, "Wait a second. I'm not feeling. And he didn't take it away.
The point of it is that there was no due process. They said immediately with judgment, it has to be executed.
And he had the evidence, and there's a connection. You're guilty. You're done.
Motivation. You're done.
Even what the DuPont was saying, he's like, "We're no longer doing all these lengthy things now.
Yeah.
Now we're just like straight up sending them right to the incinerator.
Yep.
We're not even gonna, just execute them on site."
I mean, to be fair, there's so many better poets than Yeats. So, if you got to choose a book to die over, if you're gonna get caught listening to something artistic, get caught listening to the Red Bean podcast with reviews.
That's right. That is
on
correct.
Art and
please like and subscribe, by the way.
Culture and that'd definitely be one in Equilibrium you could break the law for.
That's right. And if anything, make sure don't ever skip your Prozium dose because you might be a sense offender.
Yeah.
We're going to return back here.
Ain't no sense in that.
I liked what they came up with this whole idea. And this is the crescendo. This is like when everything starts to accelerate. This is the build-up. Where all of a sudden, Preston eventually starts meeting the leader of the resistance.
Sure.
And here's the part that I love. He said to Preston, he's like, "What would you have me do?" He's like, "We want you to kill Father.
Mm-hmm.
If you kill Father and we stop the Prozium, the word of Father dying and all of a sudden the Prozium gone, it will cause such a reaction, even for a day, which shows you, in some ways, it kind of reminds me of...
Wouldn't that plan be ruined if you only had to take it once a month? Or if it was like a booster once every...
See, here's the thing that I think was so powerful about what the rebel leader was saying. I remember listening to this lady. She had just she spent her whole entire life in communist China with Mao Zedong. She was live when his time.
Yeah.
And when Mao died, there was such a shockwave because people literally thought this man was God.
Yeah.
There are people in China who thought Mao Zedong was a god. And when he died, it was like their whole world fell apart. And I really think that's how they captured this moment of being like, when you kill Father, it's going to be like God dies and everything is falling apart. Everything that we built up on this one person is now gone, which really shows you what happens when you have a cult of personality. When someone's like the head leader and that person dies, it almost makes you wonder, like some people are saying, like, how can this organization continue forward if the person behind it is no longer here. What are your thoughts about that idea, Dr. Frog? The cult of personality dying. How do the members keep moving forward?
So part of it, with any revolution, you need visionaries who can map out what a future is. And then you need people to buy in that the future is going to be better than the past. Right now, there isn't a sort of future that we're supposed to fill in. Again, I would go back to that doctrine of the golden mean, something where there's an appropriate relationship with our own emotions, and you can avoid the few emotions like hatred and intense anger that lead to things like wars. But I'm going to quote the Beatles' Revolution from the White Album. And, it says, you say you want a revolution, we all want to change the world. But when you talk about destruction, don't you know that you can count me out? It's going to be all right. You say that you got a real solution. Well, we'd all love to see the plan.
Yep.
Further down, relating to that Chairman Mao quote you said,
yep.
But if you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, you ain't going to make it with anyone anyhow, meaning people aren't going to buy into your solution.
Yep.
If you have them follow a false god.
And I think there's another quote I always remember through Mao Zedong. One of the things he says is, revolution is nothing more than kicking down a rotting door. And what this government in this movie represents is a rotting door.
Yeah.
And you had some revolutionaries who said, if we kill Father and we stop this production of Prozium, that door will fall.
Well, and
it tells you how flimsy these institutions really are.
Well, you can certainly take them down, and power's fleeting. The human lifespan isn't really that long when you look at human history.
Very short.
And here's the thing, though. There's always going to be some change within culture. I'll just throw out some social contract theory. So there's this idea, it's a theory in ethics, that part of what grounds our sensibilities about morality are that we form a social contract with one another, saying, and it's one that's rationally binding, and it's going to be made up of principles that I would accept as long as you accept. So things like, I won't harm you as long as you don't harm me, and now we have
a non-aggression principle.
And now we have a sense of privacy, and if I work on my field and I grow my harvest, you don't steal that, and I won't steal yours. And now we have a sense of property rights.
Yep.
And Philip Kitcher, in his 2011 book, The Ethical Project, sort of maps out what that looks like. And I think that there's two really approaches that, depending on what you think about human nature, you're going to have different responses to this. John Locke was living around the same time as Thomas Hobbes. They were both English philosophers, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Hobbes grew up in the middle of a civil war in England. And what he noticed is that life, he said, there's a scarcity of resources, everybody has needs, and there's always going to be competition for those scarcity of resources. And so life without a social contract is going to be nasty, brutish, and short.
Yep.
And so in his book called The Leviathan for Hobbes was a sort of dictator that we need in order to keep us in line and in order, because our human nature would be violent and destructive to one another if we didn't have this social contract in order.
It sounds very Machiavellian. It's a
bit of a negative view on human nature. John Locke, by contrast, who influenced Thomas Jefferson in writing the Declaration of Human Rights,
yep.
and said we have life, liberty,
and the Bill of Rights.
And for John Locke, he said property. Our natural rights are life, liberty, and property. Now, Jefferson changed property to pursuit of happiness because he didn't want it to sound as materialistic. But what Locke thought is we're still grounded by what's called the law of nature, meaning even outside of the social contract, we're still going to care for one another to some degree. We're social animals.
Yep.
An example, if you watch the movie The Purge, it's this idea of, let's imagine if no laws applied for a day and murder were legal. Well, in the movie The Purge, everyone just runs around and robs and shoots each other. More than likely, if that actually occurred, if you believe like John Locke did with the law of nature, I'd probably walk outside and help my neighbor. I wouldn't immediately attack everyone.
Yeah.
If for one day there were no laws. We can still be reasonable people. So the transition of government,
yep.
which again influenced the American Revolution, Locke said it's okay to overthrow a dictator,
yep.
have that transition in government. But depending on what it is, one theory in ethics is what grounds our moral sensibilities is this social contract that we make with each other. And I like that this film explores that in overthrowing, what was the name of the place?
Libria.
Libria.
Librium.
Librium.
Yeah. One of the things I did like about this film is that last part of the film where basically DuPont says, he talks to DuPont, Preston does, and he says, I want to have an audience with Father.
Yes.
And DuPont's like, no one takes meets with Father after all these assassination attempts. He's like, even the man who brings the resistance. And I love how he's just pushing his way closer and closer to Father. But we find out later on, and I think even you were kind of maybe surprised by, were you surprised that DuPont was really Father this whole time?
I expected it. And it's because if there's someone, just like the man behind the curtain, they were talking to the person in The Wizard of Oz saying, I'll ask the person, let me go behind this curtain, and then I'll ask them, and then they'll give a response. And, whenever that happens, if there's a one liaison at the top that's saying, I'll speak for, so-and-so, when you look at how human our social political structures are, they're very much human. There's nothing above and beyond, right? And so when that happens, I kind of look at the person who's saying, "Oh no, I'm speaking, but with the power of X, Y, Z."
Yeah.
If you're looking at a priest who's still human.
Yeah.
Then I actually thought that was the person. You might have missed me saying this in an earlier meeting with them when they were first talking about the resistance. When it was just both of them next to each other and the guards were in the hallway like a couple feet back from them. I'm not sure if you heard me say this, but I said, "Oh, is he just going to kill him now?"
Oh yeah.
I said that about halfway through the movie.
Okay.
I said, "Oh, is he just gonna kill this guy now?" Because that's all you need is him to get close to him, with no guards around, and
you take him right out.
I thought that was gonna happen.
Yeah.
I thought taking out Father was gonna happen at the halfway mark. Which I'm gonna make another point. It's an hour 47 minutes long. This I think would make a wonderful. Dystopian, maybe a 50-minute Black Mirror episode. I think they stretched it. They built a bit more drama and tension with it. The gun fu scenes were great.
I think a lot of the martial arts.
Yes.
And I think they kind of beat you over the head about these emotions. But I will say this: that last fight was great. Him throwing those magazines down the hallway, him sitting there in that heart monitor. They're doing a polygraph test on him.
Enough swordplay to make Quentin Tarantino froth at the mouth.
Exactly.
Almost reminded me of B taking on the Crazy 88s in Kill Bill.
Yeah, Kill Bill. Very, very reminiscent of it.
Around the same time too.
What I did like about it was that whole scene where you have DuPont basically kind of rubbing it in him, saying, without incident. And all of a sudden you see his heartbeat stop, and he's like, with incident.
With incident. Yeah.
And he just turns around and he just starts blowing people away. What a cool
thing to say. That's up there with the quote of, I'm here to chew bubble gums and kick butt, and I'm all out of bubble gum.
And I'm all out of bubble gum.
Saying with incident is a little bit like it's a cool thing to say before starting a fight scene.
Exactly. As we get towards the end, having anticipated the trap, Preston fights his way through an army of bodyguards of DuPont's office, confronting and killing Brendan in a katana battle. Were you impressed how fast he finished?
You mean Brandt? Yeah.
Brandt? Yes. The katana battle.
I was surprised at how quick. It made me think that he was holding back earlier.
Mm-hmm.
One argument is made is, well, you assume that if you're emotionally controlled, your amygdala takes over and hijacks your brain, so maybe you wouldn't be as good a sword or gun fu person as you would be.
What that told me, that whole scene, was this.
Yes.
I think Brandt kept thinking...
strategically held back.
He kept thinking to himself, because I have this new position now, I'm the top dog, this guy is out the door. You could actually tell him he was smiling. He was kind of gloating a little bit over there because he was like, hey, I'm already, because he had no emotions. So this guy didn't even have the ability to experience fear. Had he been able to experience fear, I really believe this guy would have just ran out the door.
Well, here's the thing. I thought they were going to do the Matrix route where, let's say, Agent Smith doesn't have emotions. Keanu Reeves' emotions were what was holding him back in the Matrix somewhat, right? His fear of not being able to make the jump or of dying, right?
Or maybe the spoon stuff,
Yeah, and I was thinking of him being nervous jumping across the buildings and stuff. But the thing is, the emotions didn't seem to affect Preston's abilities at all. I thought once he experienced emotions, maybe he wouldn't handle the guns as well because now he's nervous for the first time in his life.
Yeah.
Now maybe he's not going to be as great or clinical.
I would think,
but everything seems muscle memory.
Muscle memory,
he just
yeah.
executed on it.
You just muscle memory.
But I thought there might have been a more important thing saying emotions are important even if they make us weaker.
Yes. One thing I did like was...
They didn't go that route, though. They just said,
I love... The only thing I could describe as DuPont versus Preston was gun slapping.
Gun slapping, yes.
I love gun slapping.
Close quarter combat.
They got so close. They were like trying to shoot each other, but they got slapping away the hand.
Yeah, we haven't done a review on this yet, but Madoka Magica, the Rebellion movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Hamura versus... Hamura versus Mami.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of gun slapping.
There's a lot of gun slapping there. Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's always good. It reminds me of those old Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan movies that you can see. I love that sort of hand-to-hand quick combat.
I do like it.
Done well.
I do like it at the end. Preston eventually slaps the gun out of Preston's hand and he wins. And as DuPont pleads for his life, asking, is it really worth it? And as Preston thinks about his wife passing, this girl, this one he kind of started developing feelings for, he said, I paid gladly, and kills DuPont. He destroys the command center and that broadcast father's propaganda, and Preston watches with satisfaction from above as the underground destroys Prozium manufacturing plants, signaling the beginning of the revolution.
Revolution. Well, you know.
We're going to have to play some Beatles music in the background as the revolution is raging on.
I hope it doesn't scan my voice and DMCA strike it. Anyway.
But overall, I think this is a wonderful movie.
What would you rate this at?
I think we're going to have to give this a rating.
Yeah.
I give this a solid 10. I know some people will point out all the flaws in this film, maybe saying it's too long. One of the reasons why I keep coming back to this movie is you don't have a lot of films that present that noir. We don't really have a lot of cyberpunk movies anymore.
Yeah.
I really feel like this is like the last time we've seen cyberpunkish or anything like that was The Matrix, this movie, and Blade Runner. And so Dark City. But other than that, this is a kind of unfortunately, we don't see a lot of dark noir mystery sci-fi dramas mixed with impeccable action scenes, impeccable acting from Gattaca a little bit. Christian Bale really carries this movie.
It really does.
He carried the whole movie.
Yeah, a lot of and I because wasn't he Batman?
He was Batman.
Yeah. So in the 2015 Batman, I remember thinking after some of the training montages, I was like, is this where Batman shows up?
I think the other aspect that makes Christian Bale an amazing actor is also the fact that he also played in the Machinist, which I would love for me and you to actually watch that movie too.
Yeah.
Which basically he starved himself for this role, so he became super skinny.
He was emaciated.
He was emaciated. He was like a skeleton in the film, and then he had to beef up immediately for Batman. So he had to change his body for his acting.
He really gets into his
method actor. Yeah. So I give this a solid 10. I know some people will probably nitpick here or there, but if you love action, if you like noir, if you like tense scenes, if you like crazy action films, if you like these emotional moments where hands are touching in front of a camera or videotaping them,
even though you shouldn't,
and of course, I had to give it to you. I love your reaction, Dr. Frog.
I was
when you were so angry at John Preston outside that processing thing. You're like, no, you're screwing this up. No, and you're like swinging at him.
I was acting like an LSU fan during the Les Miles era in the fourth quarter.
Either that or an Ohio fan reacting to a Michigan fan,
acting to a 60-0 blowout when it should have been 70-0. There we go.
You're just like swinging. I
would have gone for 2.
You're like hell fury.
I would have gone for 3, but I had to go for 2 because they wouldn't let me go for 3.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think, but so for myself, the first half of the movie I was a bit disappointed. I was going to give it a 6.5 or 7.
Okay.
First half because it was a bit long and drawn out. Second half of the movie I was sucked in.
Yep.
And because of that, I'm going to have to give it an 8. Yep. I think this is a solid film. The rewatchability I call into question because once some of the things are revealed, I'm not sure if I'd want to go through another 2 hours to re-experience it.
I've watched this
But
multiple
there's
times.
details that I'm sure I'd pick up on the second time around, like with the kids and their behavior.
And the handgun being handed back and forth, something that you would never have noticed. Like little things that you wouldn't have caught the first time around, but the second time you're going to be like, oh, wait a second, I recognize this. Oh, look at that. The girl is playing with her cereal.
I would have already processed my emotions about what I would do with the final puppy, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my stomach was in knots. Like, do you save or not? And there was a lot of floorboard.
And then you heard the dogs crying in the background. It was so
hard. In the trunk, yeah.
Oh,
it's difficult. I mean, I have a soft spot for animals, and so...
I have to say, this is definitely a big recommend.
The dogs aren't causing the war. What's wrong with them having emotions? Anyway.
But it sounds like we're both sense offenders, and we're sense offenders, and we probably need to take our Prozium. I'm not sure if our audience members need to take Prozium.
This wasn't the most efficient podcast, but I think we covered...
I think we covered all our bases here.
Let us know what you think about the movie if you've seen it.
If you can, leave a comment. Please like and subscribe, and let us know what was your favorite part about the movie. And if you didn't like the movie, tell us why you didn't like it. That will make our episode for the Red Bean Podcast, New Orleans edition, our movie review of Equilibrium.
Take care, everyone.
Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.